This is Ross Garcia bringing you another report here at the Loan Modification Clinic. So what we were talking about were people that were in debt, people that had called in and said, hey, you know what, I'm trying to refinance my house. Now, I had did another video before. We didn't cover the topic of how a refinance worked, what equity was. Basically, what equity is basically when you're paying your house on time, you're building what's called equity. So, in essence, you want to refinance your house to cash out some of that equity to basically pay off your car, your credit card, bills that you have, right? Now, a lot of people that are trying to refinance come to find out that because of their debt being so high and because of the bank not wanting to lend you money, you can't refinance your house to pay off the car or the credit cards. So what do? So basically, the loan modification is an alternative if you have a hardship, if you've experienced, a lot of debt, or like the lady that called me was at the hospital and she's like, you know what, I had surgery, my payments are going up. So when you have an adjustable rate a mortgage, you can't pay that house because the rate keeps going up. And we've seen that from the 2% to a 3 to a 5 or a 7. And that's the issue. Now, the Federal Reserve is doing what's called quantitative easing. So they're trying to print their way out of this. Donald Trump said it himself. He said, we have the power to print. So, going back to World War II, Germany did it. The Nazis did it. And at that time, they were doing hyperinflation. So they were printing their way out of it, or at least trying to. And when you print, it basically diminishes the dollar value as the more you print. Why? Because salaries don't go up. So when you go to the store, you're trying to buy your groceries and you can't. Like they did a survey, right? Computerized survey. And basically what they did was they told someone, go to the store and buy the orange juice, buy the milk, buy the eggs, right? And buy all the vegetables, all the stuff you need. So, he bought, and this is like 1990, right? He bought a whole cart full of groceries with $100, right? And then they moved it up like 2017, 2018 with the same $100. They said, go buy the eggs, the the milk, the vegetables. So basically he only had 25% of that cart. So what happened to the other 75%? I'm going to tell you what happened. What happened is that prices went up, right? And the dollar hasn't went up. Maybe it went up, but compared to the overall picture, like when you match it up to Bitcoin, why is Bitcoin worth, 12, 13,000, or even up at one point it was at 19,000 for $1? The reason is because of the value. Why is gold worth, 1,300 an ounce compared to $1, right? So that's what we're looking at. We compare things, and a lot of the people out here are working day by day, and they don't even realize that the biggest investment of their life is basically diminished. It's basically has no value. So by the time you want to sell your house, you have to go to the closing with 50, 60,000 or 100,000. Why? Because the bank, you signed documents where the bank said it was okay for them to give you a balloon at the end of the loan. So now at the end of the loan, you have this balloon and you have to pay it. So that's what's called a balloon. So on one hand, you have an adjustable rate mortgage, right? And then on the other hand, you have your balloon. And then you're paying your adjustable rate mortgage. So when it adjusts, sometimes it's all due at once. And that's where the loan modifications come in to basically rescue you out of this situation. So yes, when they call you, they want you to negotiate and they want you to talk to them, but the call's monitored and recorded when they call you. So, that's one of the things to look out for, is to say, hey, I need advice. I need to talk to someone that knows exactly what the bank is doing or what they have done and how this could affect me. So, that's why it's very important to find out what the Federal Reserve is doing. And what they're doing is they're just printing their way through this because they realized that in 2008, 2009, when they bailed out Wall Street, when they bailed out, the too big to fail, these banks, which were too big to fail, well, they failed. And the banks said, hey, they're too big to fail. Well, let's give them a couple $1 trillion to try to, patch this thing up, like as if it never happened. So some of the things that we do affect the other side of the world. Somewhere like China, right? And China's like, well, hey, guess what? We don't want to be a part of this. Now, we are part up to the petrodollar. This is the dollar that basically, when people buy oil, they basically have to buy it with the dollar. So in a way, we're kind of like a servicing country. And yes, we have a big army, a big navy, but we're a servicing country and we're charging for our service, right? Just like the way the banks charge you the interest rate for your home. So, China said, hey, we don't want to be a part of the petrodollar. We don't want to be a part of this mess. We'd rather just get out and we'd rather do our own thing. And if we need to buy oil, we can buy it with gold, right? So, the United States has a lot of decisions that they need to make to move forward, because we're used to spending money. We're a nation of debt. And right now we have people that are basically waking up with hangovers, or waking up with a bad issue. And this issue is an issue of waking up and kind of like being in like this state of a drug, right? You see drug addicts, they wake up and they're shaking, and they need their drugs, right? They need their fix, as they say. And the thing is that how can you, if you're so used to spending and having so much debt, how can you spend when you don't have any money? So going back to what I said earlier, it's like rotting itself from the inside out. So in the future, as the years go by, we're going to see this. We're going to see our country basically, as I said earlier, if anyone remembers Chris Farley from Saturday Night Live, he passed away, right? He actually passed away from a drug overdose. He was, I think he was from Wisconsin or Illinois. So when he passed away, they found him in a hotel. He had died from a drug overdose. And he used to say, in Saturday Night Live, he did a skit where he said, do you want to live in a van right down the river? Like, if you don't go to school, you will be living in a van right down the river. They actually did a survey that people in California are basically living in vans right down the river. Like, they're basically living in a van right down the river. And these people couldn't afford to pay their homes, and they didn't have a job, or they got laid off and they lost their homes. So, they're living in a van, and housing is very expensive in California, and rents are very expensive in California. So on the opposite side of that coin, you have a state like Texas, which is actually the #1 populated state, where people are flocking into that state. And you see people, the rent is very inexpensive. It's very cheap. And then housing is very cheap. You can buy a house at a good price. But why do we see that? Well, they experienced a hurricane. So, they went through a hurricane, and investors went in and they started buying up these properties because they're like literally underwater. Like, there's water in the property. It's not worth as much. And then you have people that are saying, hey, you know what? I don't want this house. It was flooded. I'm out of here. Or, you know what? I got to fix my house. But the modifications can help you fix that situation. Why? Because you experienced a hardship. And people not only are experiencing hardships with their home, but they're experiencing that hardship where they're used to spending that money, and they don't have credit cards they're not getting the credit for them to go out and spend. So, you kind of feel like you need your fix, but you can't get it because the banks are no longer lending you that money, because they know that the game is going to end soon. So because of that, people are flocking to Texas, and rents are cheaper. How long will it last? We don't know. But the country is in a state of emergency because we're printing our way through it, but regardless of how much we print, it has no value. It has no value. And that's why Bitcoin is so expensive compared to the dollar. So yes, I had said in a video earlier, Donald Trump's been hanging around with some guy, I think he's part of the Federal Reserve, and he likes negative interest rates. So will loan modifications introduce negative interest rates? We will find out. So how would that work? In my opinion, I feel like negative interest rates might be like something like, instead of you having a 2% fix, you'll have a negative 2% fix, and you'll pay more into the principal faster. So that would be actually a great idea. And I would congratulate Donald Trump on that if he introduces some type of, if we end up going down a downward roller coaster ride, if they would introduce a negative interest rate, that would help out so many people that have adjustable rate mortgages, that have balloons, that are upside on their house. So, so that's what I want to leave you with. And thank you for your time. Have a good day.